Hello everyone, welcome to episode 5 of Reading Layamon's Brut. In a small bit of news, I've created a Facebook page for the video series, which you can find at the link, which I will place in the video description. So feel free to head on over there and pay it a visit. Last time, Brutus organised the Trojan slaves into an army and asked the Greek king Pandrasus to grant them freedom. The king, needless to say, did not take kindly to this, and launched an attack on the Trojans. Brutus ambushed the army, though, and managed to defeat the Greeks, even capturing the king's brother Antigonus. Today we're picking up just after the battle. That he heard the king, Pandrasus, hit nes him noch die quem, that Antigonus, his brother, was in armliche benden. The king sende swa wieder swa leste his riche, and heicht Layamon, the michte riden othergan, that her kommen mit him to dan kastler of Sparatin. Nes kastel nan swa strong, in dan land of Griekland. He wende hit to sothe, so hit nere, that Brutus hevde the men. There he mit ficht bewon, idon into dan kastler, and there hem quick helde, and himself there fortmide, for there a mutual biete. The king Pandrasus heard that. It was not pleasing to him at all that Antigonus, his brother, was in miserable, sorrowful bonds or chains. The king sent as wide or far as his kingdom lasted, so as far as his borders. The king commanded each man who could ride or go, presumably by foot, that they would come with him to the castle of Sparatin. There was not any castle so strong in the land of Greece. He, King Pandrasus, thought it true, though it were not true, that Brutus had placed in the castle the men whom he conquered with the fight and held them there alive. So the syntax is a little bit convoluted here, but hopefully that makes it a bit clearer. We're still reading this verb hevde and idon, that he had put into the castle, and himself there forthmide, therewith. Because of the very great... This is the noun form of a verb that we saw earlier on. This is the verb that was used when Brutus sent his people out to acquire food and weapons and various other supplies. It just means to get things, to obtain, and here it's referring to the prisoners, so we might read it as captives, because of the very great value of the captives. Ach Brutus doet betere red, and him tha bet I lomp. In don kastle he doet hende 600 of his knichten, himself mit his finger he to wode ferde. The king to dan kastle forth mit his ferde, there he lie a booten, tharinne waren his lather ferned. His ferd he sette on alchere siden, ofte he rasten and ramden together, mit stelene orde and mit starke bieten, mit stokken and mit stanen stalficht he makeden, mit griekische fuur fehlen the fai. There was muchul blood gute, balu there was riva. But Brutus did a better counsel, so he enacted better advice, and it befell better for him there. In the castle he placed 600 of his good knights. This word hende means good, not in a moral sense necessarily, but in the sense of ability. So we could even possibly translate it as skillful. We can also translate it as noble or courteous, but good is a sufficiently broad term to cover it here. He went to the wood himself with his finger. Is similar to biet in that we've seen the corresponding verb form of this, meaning to take, and so the finger is just something that's been taken, in this case, again, the prisoners, so with his prisoners. Then in line 310, you'll notice that we actually don't have a verb. That's not a problem, though. In Middle English, as in Old English, where we come across sentences that don't have verbs, we can infer either the verb to be or a verb of motion, and in 310 it's pretty clear that a verb of motion is implied. So the king went forth with his army to the castle. There he lay about it, so he surrounded it. Therein were his hateful enemies. He set his army on each side. Often they rushed it, they attacked it, assaulted it, and they attacked it together. With steel points. This word ord means point, but it's often used to mean spear. With steel spears and with strong cuts. With sticks and with stones, they made an unrelenting or an unyielding battle. With Greek fire, the doomed fell. This expression, fälen the fie, means the doomed fell, and it's one that you should, you will get used to if you persist with the text, because we're going to see it a lot throughout. There was very great blood flow. Destruction there was rife. The knightes of den Castle quickly hem withstoden, that ne'er micht des kinges folk of hem fall makien, ach the king of his monnen mony 1,000 lass. The king was on mod sar, that was for his monne lure. He tech hin again an a throw, and threateth then a castel, and that folk therein. Then he hit hevde beunen, that he hem wulde quellen, oder quick all verbrennen. He let a makien en a diet, there was underliche derb, a boten his ferd, and fired her mit thornen, and lie there a boten, and abat his bale seethers. The knights of the castle stood against them, or withstood them, in a lively way. Note that quick is a false friend. It doesn't mean swiftly or speedily, so we could translate it as vigorously. So that the king's people could not make the fall of them. But the king lost many thousands of his men. The king was sorrowful in his mind. That was because of the loss of his men. He, the king, went back one more time. Remember what we said last time about reflexive pronouns and verbs of motion. That's what we have happening here. So Middle English uses a reflexive pronoun where Modern English does not. So we don't need to translate this one. And threatened the castle and the people therein. Then we have the content of the threat. That when he had conquered it, that he would kill them or completely burn them alive. He commanded to be made a ditch. So this is the standard bit of defense. A ditch which was incredibly or wondrously deep, about or around his army, and they joined it with thorns, and lay thereabout, and the king awaited his destruction. Now, this has occasioned some variety of translations, this little half-line here, because on the face of it, it doesn't seem to make sense. The king is being pretty aggressive, so it seems odd for him to just sit around passively awaiting his destruction. Frederick Madden, in 1847, in his edition, reads this verb as a form of the verb boten, meaning to remedy or fix, and so he says that the king is fixing his damages, so he's recuperating and recovering his forces ready to attack the castle. Rosamund Allen, in her much more recent translation of the Brut, softens the force of Balaseethers and reads it as outcomes, so the king is just awaiting the outcome. I don't think either of those readings is necessary, because what I think is happening here is that this phrase, awaited his destructions, is proleptic. So Lorman is foreshadowing the fact that destruction is coming to the king, whether or not the king is intentionally awaiting it, and he's not, because he means to attack the castle and he's making all kinds of threats. Nevertheless, destruction is coming to him, and so he is, unbeknownst to him, awaiting it. The king was swither wrath, and swar muchelne ath, that nolde heth on faren, his fernden fire were. Idon castle were een moniamon, and muchel mete there behoved. The mete forthiwat, for there fengen fele to. Her nomen anna arendrake, de adele was tonerde. Her sende to her laverde, de lev hem was on herten. Her hine gretten, mit godene herre worten. Her bedden hine kom to helpe, mit allen his strengthe. De wiele de her weren i sunde, de weren his sele men. Brutus hine bethochter of swulchere ned, and thus word side mid sothere herte. The king was very angry, and swore a great oath that he would not go thence, so he wouldn't go away, before his enemies were doomed. In the castle were many men, and behoved or required great amounts of food there. The food went forth, so it ran out, because too many took it there. Not implying theft necessarily, but just because they needed it. They took an errand runner, a messenger, who was noble at need, so he's good for the job. They sent to their lord, who was dear to them in heart. They greeted him with their good words. They asked him to come to help with all his strength, the while that they were well, unharmed, they were healthy, they were well, they were his good men. Brutus bethought himself of such need, so he considered it, and said this word with a true heart, and this might mean that he's saying it internally. He doth himself a freme, that helpeth his frienden, swa ich wulle mine, be mine quicke lieve. There was there a wely boormon, Anacletus was he haten, mit des kinges brother he was he taken, and there lie in a benden. Brutus him ramde to mit grimmen his rasen, bydd on a toppe he hine nom, al swa he hine would of slain, and his nakede swerd liede on his necke, and thus word side Brutus the sailor, Nithing thou art al dead, butten thou do min red, and the laverd al swa, butte thou min lare do. Ach if thou wilt, thou micht well helpen ink selven. So this is Brutus speaking in his heart. He does himself a service, causes a profit or a benefit or an advantage, who helps his friends. So I will mine by my, and this is a bit redundant, but by my living life, and that's the end of the direct speech. There was there a well-born man, he was named Anacletus. With the king's brother he was taken, and there lay in bonds, or in his chains. Brutus rushed upon him, or attacked him with his fierce assaults. By the top, so by the head, he seized him, as though he would slay him, and laid his naked sword on his neck. And Brutus the Good said this word, You wretch, or coward, or something, you are completely dead, unless you do my counsel, and your lord likewise, unless you do my teaching, or my instruction. But if you wish, you might well help, and ink selven requires a little bit of comment. Ink here is something that just doesn't exist in English anymore. In modern English, we have two grammatical numbers, the singular and the plural. The singular when you're referring to only one thing, and the plural when you're referring to more than one thing. So one desk, singular, but two desks or three desks, plural. And likewise with people. I, only one of me, or we, there's multiple people here whom I'm referring to. Or in the third person pronouns, she, singular, or they, plural. Old English has three grammatical numbers, at least in the case of the first and second person pronouns, not elsewhere. But in the first and second person pronouns, Old English has a singular, a dual, and a plural. So the singular refers to one, the dual refers to two, and then the plural refers to more than two. And as far as I'm aware, Layamon is the only Middle English writer who uses the Old English dual. It might show up somewhere in the Peterborough Chronicle, but I'm not aware of it offhand. And in saying that, there's probably some really famous example that's slipping my mind at the moment. But we might bring it into modern English here by reading it as the word both. So, if you wish, you can well help both yourselves, both the king, both the king's brother Antigonus and yourself, Anacletus. That might be a good place to leave it for now. It's not as much text as we usually cover, but this is the closest we're going to get to a narrative pause for a little while, and I figured it's probably better to run short than long, so we'll pick up here next time. As ever, thank you for watching. If you have any questions, suggestions, corrections, or feedback, any feedback whatsoever, please let me know in the comments. All the best, and I'll see you next time.